I don't think that the Indianapolis Colts got any better this offseason, and that's why the Titans are primed to jump them in the AFC South. I'll explain why on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We are continuing our AFC South deep dive with the Indianapolis Colts. We talked about the Houston Texans yesterday. We'll finish with Jacksonville tomorrow. But now I want to tell you why the Colts had an incredibly boring offseason and why I think the Titans are primed to jump them in the standings. Before I get into that, I do want to thank you for making the Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. Again, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one. Okay. And speaking of everydayers, I'm sure you guys have enjoyed my rankings of the AFC South position groups. The Houston Texans conversation yesterday. Again, as a reminder, Jacksonville will be tomorrow. But looking at the Indianapolis Colts, a snoozer, man. An absolute snoozer of an offseason. The classic Chris Ballard, who I think is absolutely one of the most overrated general managers in the entire NFL. Quite frankly, the Indianapolis Colts are one of the most overrated teams in the entire NFL, in my opinion. Every single year, it's a media darling Indianapolis Colts team that disappoints, doesn't make the playoffs, doesn't do anything in the playoffs. And I think the Colts are primed for another season just like that. You look at the moves that they've made in the offseason, or really the lack of moves, at least bringing in new talent. I got to give it a C. I got to give the Colts a C for their offseason grade. They make extensions with Kenny Moore, the slot cornerback, with Michael Pittman, the wide receiver, Taven Bryan, Julian Blackmon, the injured safety. They extend to Forrest Buckner. They extend Zaire Franklin, who Franklin is a good player. Forrest Buckner, good players. I understand why we're doing that. Really, the big notable addition is they bring in Joe Flacco. Okay? They lose Garner Minshew. Joe Flacco, Garner Minshew. Minshew's a little younger, but I think you can get similar. They lose Zach Moss. And, I mean, I'm not a big fan of what else they've done at the running back group, and I talked about that when we ranked running back positions. Jonathan Taylor is a good player, but outside of that, I don't really like anything that the Colts have there. Evan Hall or Tyler Goodson or whoever you want to name, I don't think any of them are very, difference-making players or players that really matter for the Colts. They have Jonathan Taylor, and they didn't add another good number 2 running back, in my opinion. So one of the big strengths of their team is not as good as it was last year because they didn't fill that hole that Zach Moss left and went to the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, in the draft, I do like some of the pieces that they brought in, okay? I do like Latu. All right, I think he's going to be a ready-made edge rusher. Getting him at 15, the first defensive player off the board. To me, Latu is a solid addition. A.D. Mitchell, I like Adonai Mitchell. I think the Titans should have picked Adonai Mitchell at pick number 38. I think that was a mistake, and I think he could be their number 1 wide receiver going forward. Even if he's not their number 1 wide receiver, though, still better than Alec Pierce, and I think that's a good move. That's a good addition. Matt Gonclaves, injured 2023, but could have some potential, whatever. That's a throwaway. But even Tanner Bortolini, who instead of letting him be a backup center, they're trying to play him at guard. I don't know if that's going to work out, but I liked Bortolini coming out of college this year. So I don't hate their draft classes, especially their early picks. They're all right. They're, adding Jalen Simpson there, who I talked about it earlier. Another guy. They're trying to move him from safety to cornerback. I don't know how that's going to work out. We'll see there. But overall, did they get any better? That's the question. I don't see how the Colts got any better. What were they last year? 9-8, 8-9. I mean, that in this division, and I end up talking about it. You're going to hear the conversation tomorrow when I talk to Tony Wiggins. But he talks about how after 2022, Jacksonville thought, oh, we don't need to make any, huge additions. Obviously, they're getting Calvin Ridley back on the field, but they didn't go out and make a ton of huge additions. They were just like, hey, this team is good. We're going to keep rolling with it. And that's exactly what Houston did not do this year. Houston said, hey, we had a good season last year, but we got to put the pedal to the metal. And Tony Wiggins astutely talks about that on tomorrow's show. The Colts did the opposite of that. The Colts didn't go all in. The Colts didn't say, hey, we're close. We're going to add a lot of talent to this team. The Colts just brought back their guys and said, hey, we're just going to do this again. And then we're just going to hope that Anthony Richardson makes this team better. And to me, Anthony Richardson and the conversation around him really encapsulates. Is that a word? Encapsulates? I think so. You guys let me know. If not, I'm making it up on the spot. But Anthony Richardson really is the Colts in a nutshell. You have a guy like Dan Orlovsky from ESPN saying Anthony Richardson is my favorite under the radar second year quarterback. In what way is Anthony Richardson under the radar? Everyone is blowing smoke for Anthony Richardson all season long. ESPN has him ranked as the third best fantasy football quarterback in the NFL. And you're telling me a guy who works for that network is saying he's under the radar? Anthony Richardson is everybody's belle of the ball right now. Everybody is hopping on. He's the big breakout quarterback for this year. Everyone. So how could he ever be under the radar? But here's the thing. Anthony Richardson could barely finish a game last year. Anthony Richardson, played 5 games before he got hurt and was out for the entire season. And I mentioned this before. Harold Landry didn't slam him to the ground. It wasn't some kind of crazy hit stick tackle. It was just a normal tackle. And Anthony Richardson has had procedures on his shoulder quite a bit. It's his throwing shoulder. He's already having issues in the offseason here where he's got to sit out practices and he's throwing with his left hand at practice and stuff. So you can bank it all on Anthony Richardson. The Colts banked it all on Anthony Richardson. They didn't go out and get any better. And they just said, hey, Anthony Richardson's going to be healthy this year, and that's going to take us to the next level. That's what happened. So you look at the moves they made, which they barely made any. They just brought back all their dudes from last year. They did not get better in any way because Chris Ballard sits on his hands and is ultra conservative, and it hasn't worked since he lost Andrew Luck. So it's just the same old for the Colts for me. And then a big bet on Anthony Richardson, who in previous bets has lost you your money. So I'm giving the Colts all season a C. I did not like it. And I think the Colts are primed for a step back. And I'll tell you how far I think they step back at the end of the show. But first, let's talk to my guy, Zach Hicks from Locked On Colts and get his thoughts about this team. Excited to dive into that. Before we do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They have superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style. eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts. For your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, folks, I am excited to welcome in one half of the excellent Locked On Colts podcast. We have Zach Hicks here with us. Excited to break down some Colts. I know it hasn't been, the other teams in the division have made quote unquote bigger moves, I guess, this offseason. But I know a lot of Colts fans are happy with what they've done and kind of the approach that they've taken. So I guess I'll let you paint the picture here for us, Zach. What would you say is the biggest offseason move that the Colts have made so far? Or, it doesn't even have to be a specific move, I guess. It could just be the philosophy that they've taken with the offseason.
Yeah, I think there's two things that really stick out to me. One is just retaining the guys that were going to hit free agency. I mean, heading into this past offseason, the Colts were looking at potentially losing Grover Stewart, Michael Pittman Jr., Zaire Franklin. They extended. He wasn't going to be a free agent, but he would have been a free agent next year.
Right.
Kenny Moore was a free agent as well. Like, there were a lot of key personnel players on this team that were set to hit free agency, and the Colts were wise to bring all these guys back. Even Julian Blackmon, a very underrated safety that they had back there last year, got him back on a 1-year deal at very, very below market value with $3.19 million on that 1-year deal. So I think that's the first thing that sticks out is your team did not get actively worse this offseason when it really could have. It really could have gotten much worse. We could be looking at Alec Pierce as wide receiver 1 and Taven Bryan starting at defensive tackle and Chris Lamont starting at slot corner. Instead, we're getting back these guys who were Pro Bowlers or fringe Pro Bowlers in Pittman and Grover and obviously Kenny Moore, who has been a Pro Bowler in the past. So getting those guys back, I think, was huge. But the real big addition, if we're talking biggest move they made this year, I think was getting a guy like Laiatu Latu, where they got him in the first round of the draft. I mean, I know there's a lot of questions about the health and the upside with him and all that, but at the end of the day, you're getting the most NFL-ready pass rusher from this past class, where a guy where if you look at the advanced statistics, it measures out favorably to prospects like the Bosa brothers, like Myles Garrett, like all these kind of prospects.
He's got great handwork. I mean, he's just a technician, basically. I mean, he's ready to play.
Right. And when you look at this Colts defensive line, I mean, the clear emphasis for this team is we're going to win in the trenches this year. We're going to have the explosiveness on offense, hopefully with Richardson and Taylor. But when it comes to where we're going to win, it's going to be with our pass rush on one side and with our offensive line on the other side. And when you look at this pass rush where the Colts were, top 5, I think, in the NFL in sacks last season, but they weren't particularly high in pass rush win rate and hurries and pressures. So you already have a group that can at least finish plays, get sacks, get after the quarterback in some degree, but they didn't have that closer, that guy who's going to win on his one-on-one blocks, the guy who's going to add that consistent pressure. And now they're adding that to a group that brought back everybody. I mean, DeForest Buckner's back there. Grover Stewart, again, for run defense. You got Kwity Paye, who had nearly 10 sacks last year. Dio Dango had over 10 sacks last year. Samson Ebukam had 9.5 sacks last year. This is a good defensive line. And now you're adding, hopefully, that big time closer, for baseball terms, you're adding that Mariano Rivera to this group that can just finish out games. So I think when we're looking at the biggest addition to this roster, Laiatu Latu is the guy who could put them over the top. And he's an NFL ready guy. Like, this isn't some 20-year-old project player that you're projecting to be an impact player in 2 or 3 years. This is a guy who from day one, you're expecting him ready to go.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I know that they're not super comparable in their play style per se, but I compared it a lot to like Jalen Phillips. There were medical issues coming out of college, but the talent is like top 15 level player. You know what I mean? And I like Jalen Phillips. I was willing, the Titans weren't in a great position to get him or anything, and that wasn't a logical choice, but I would have done it. I would have done what the Dolphins did and taken Phillips, and I would have done what the Colts done and taken Latu as well. I think that was a move. But with that being said, obviously excited about the additions, excited about the holes that were filled by bringing back guys. But what is the biggest hole, in your opinion, that still remains on the roster? Maybe they can fix it before, obviously summer free agency and cuts will happen, but maybe they can't fix. There are some things that just can't be fixed at this stage in the offseason. What do you see as kind of the biggest void that the Colts still have on their roster right now?
Yeah, the biggest question mark is still that secondary on defense, or even you can even say the back seven, but the secondary in general. I mean, again, on defense, you're relying on that pass rush and that run defense with the front 4 guys, whoever's going to be on the field, to carry the way, just to lead the way on defense this year. Or you're banking on these young guys taking that step that we just haven't seen from these young guys yet. You have Kenny Moore, you have Julian Blackmon, good, solid vets who know what they're doing. But aside from that, you're going to start Juju Brents this year, who
Hey,
when
I
he
like
played,
Juju Brents, though.
yeah,
I like Brents.
when he played, he was good. It was only like 7 or 8 games that we got out of him, though. But when
Right.
he played last year, it was some good stuff. But again, the durability, it does come into question. And can he play a full season? We need to see that here in year 2. Jalen Jones, I think, was fine for a 7th round rookie last year, but if that's one of your starting outside corners, you obviously have some concerns. So you get Dallas Flowers back, who's projected to be a starter last year, tore his Achilles in week 3. He did some good things, but like, this is not a top tier cornerback room by any means. And then at
Right.
safety, again, you have Blackman going out there. Then you have Nick Cross, former 3rd round pick, who hasn't really had much run in 2 years of the NFL. So you're either hoping for him to take that big step, or you're stuck with a big gap at that free safety position. So the Colts could obviously upgrade still here. Justin Simmons is still out there on the market. Quandre Diggs is still out there on the market.
Yep.
There's still some playable cornerbacks on the market. So there is still avenues to improve. But for the Colts, it really comes down to, we're banking on this pass rush to make life easy for these guys and hoping for one of these young guys to step up in camp, because I do think there is that option of signing another guy out there in free agency still. But obviously, as the days go by, those options dry up, and guys like Simmons and Diggs won't be around much longer.
Yeah, we just saw a guy like Marcus May get pulled off the market by the
Right.
Dolphins. And it's so funny that you say that, Zach. So behind the curtain for the people listening, I'm recording this with Zach after I've talked to Cody from Locked On Texans and I've talked to Tony from Locked On Jags. And I think that if you asked every single person, which I already have, and I know my answer, every person in the division would say, yeah, the secondary isn't very good. Now, the
Right.
Titans went out and paid heavy to have good cornerbacks. Like, I would say the Titans have the best cornerback group in the division. But if you take away cornerbacks and you look at the safety groups around, I mean, no one is very satisfied with their safety groups right now. So looks like wide receivers in the division should have a good day in division matchups. That'll be something to watch. And Titans fans are yelling at the screen right now, no, Justin Simmons is ours. You know what I mean? But I understand, the Titans ended up with Snead. If the Colts ended up with Simmons, I don't think anybody could really complain, even though I don't want that to happen still, admittedly. But with that being said, I don't want to hold you down. This isn't like some final prediction. We're going to have a lot of predictions and, time to talk about how we think these teams finish. But right now, as things stand, where do you kind of see the Colts place within the division? Do you think that they've fallen back with all the other moves that were made by other teams? Or do you think that because they brought back their core players and a lot of good guys that they can be right there up at the top again, like they were last year, one play away, which I mean, personally, I think it was a bad throw by Gardner Minshew. I don't want to blame the play. The running back maybe could have caught it, but it was behind the running back at the end of the day. I know we kind of aligned there with how we see that play playing out, but where do you think the Colts are at right now within the AFC South?
I think consistency is key when we're talking about NFL teams. And obviously, it's hard to project teams from going from one year to the next year and
Well, look at
always getting
Jacksonville.
better. Yeah.
They were going to run the division for a decade, right?
Right.
And then,
Right. It's hard to project positive improvement in every regard. Teams take steps back all the time. But I think when you look at this Colts team, you're getting year 2 of a head coach who's clearly good at what he's doing. I mean, he did a lot of good last year for the Colts, and he was working with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, which all love for Gardner. I love Gardner. It's not the guy that he designed this offense for.
Right.
So if they can get a good 17 games out of Richardson, which is a massive if, like we don't know if that's going to be the if this year, but if they can get Richardson out there, they can get Taylor out there, they can get AD Mitchell playing to his potential on offense. This defensive line can get going, and they can just maintain the pace they were at last year, but adding that X factor of Richardson in a year 2 offense with Shane Steichen. Playoffs have to be the expectation, and winning the division has to be the expectation. So, we're in the offseason now. I'm saying they're going to win this division, but I understand it's going to be a dogfight. This is a good, talented, fun, young division. And there's a lot of good teams in here, very interesting teams. But look, if you're the Colts right now, I'm not going to say it's playoffs or bust, but you have to have that expectation, getting back your quarterback, adding team players to this roster, and maintaining what you had last year, but just accentuating it through the draft and through players coming back. So I think the expectation is winning the division. That's where I'm going to go right now with the Colts.
Yeah, I think everyone in the division has hope. I think everybody has talented players. I think everybody has some flaws as well that are pretty obvious. Each team has, especially in that secondary, a lot of basically every team. I don't like their safety group. Like, I don't like any of them, honestly. Even the Titans. Like, Amani Hooker's a good player, but after that, it's terrible. So
Right.
it's going to be a very interesting division. I think it's going to be very competitive. And when you have competition, it's going to make it fun to watch. But thank you so much, Zach. I know a lot of Titans fans like to check out other divisions podcasts just to see what they have to say. Make sure you guys check out Locked On Colts if you're interested in some more behind the scenes information. But with that being said, thank you so much, Zach. Have a good one.
See ya.
All right, folks. Before we move on, I do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. All right, look, summertime means baseball, means the finals for NHL, for NBA. Both are over now, which is unfortunate, but they were somewhat entertaining. At least the Stanley Cup Finals was, in my opinion. Boo on the Boston Celtics, as you guys know. Not a big fan, but it doesn't matter what you're looking to do this summertime. You can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 that you can use to bet on, who's going to hit a home run in the baseball game, who's going to win PGA championship. There's a lot of WNBA games going on right now as well. So you can check out all of that. Make sure that you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. You can even bet on some early NFL games. Titans plus 4.5, week 1, hammering that. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Titans fans, let's cap off today's deep dive into the Indianapolis Colts. I talked about their boring offseason that I was not a fan of. We heard from Zach Hicks about his thoughts on the team. Now I want to give my record prediction, where I think the Colts finish in the division, what I think they do as a team. Before I get into that, I do want to thank you guys again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day, Monday through Friday. Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed. Also want to let you guys know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. It's on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV. It's called Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts from Locked On. You get coverage of every league from our national shows. Quit watching ESPN and FS1 and all the debate nonsense. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app, and of course here on YouTube as well. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I touched on it a little bit. But the Colts are always media darlings, whether it's Phillip Rivers, whether it's Carson Wentz, whether it's Matt Ryan, whether it's Garner Minshew, whether it's Anthony Richardson. It does not matter. The media is going to hype up the Colts. Always, always, always. And people wonder why. Well, my theory is that for a long time during the Peyton Manning years and then during the Andrew Luck years, you could count on the Colts. If you're a media person who doesn't want to look stupid, doesn't want to be wrong, doesn't want to get flamed in the media, if you're someone who has to make predictions and all of that, then you want things that you can count on. Okay? And for Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck, you could count on the Colts. If you predicted the Colts to be a playoff team, you predicted the Colts to be a wild card contender, win the division. If you predicted those sorts of things, you got it right most of the time. Okay? You got it right. Also, Andrew Luck was phenomenal. Incredible player. Peyton Manning, one of the top 5 best quarterbacks of all time. So to me, the Colts have built up a lot of trust in the media. People in the media trust the Colts organization because they have been rewarded before for predicting the Colts would do well. All right. So old habits die hard. And a team like the Titans, who has one good year, and then comes back down to earth and has one good season playing a style of football that nobody enjoys, and then comes back down to earth. It's no wonder that the media doesn't trust the Titans, but they do trust the Colts. But now we have got to a point where the Colts have been unreliable for 5 or 6 years in a row now. And still, people are buying in. And another aspect of this is the Anthony Richardson thing. People really liked Anthony Richardson. He is an exciting football player when he plays. He's a fantasy football darling. And I think the fantasy football conversation really influences the entire football discussion. If people are making flashy plays and they're good in fantasy football and all of that, then people are going to love them. You know what I mean? People are going to think highly of them because they helped them in their fantasy league, because they didn't let them down in their predictions. So it's a built-up trust that makes people believe in the Colts. And in my opinion, it's completely misplaced. This is not Andrew Luck. This is not Peyton Manning. Chris Ballard, as I mentioned, one of the most overrated general managers in the entire NFL. He has literally not done anything to move the needle for that team. And he did it again this offseason. Again, boring moves, only re-signing his players, not improving the talent at all. So, to me, look, I think that Shane Steichen is a good coach. I think that with Joe Flacco as their backup quarterback, even if Anthony Richardson gets hurt again, the Colts are going to be a competitive football team. All right. But I don't see how they got any better. So I have the Colts at 8-9, and I think they're going to be the third best team in the division behind Houston and behind the Titans. I think the Titans will be equal or better. And, nothing can move me off of that. I just don't see where the hype or the excitement is coming from the Colts. I mean, their secondary is not good. Their tight ends are milquetoast at best. The offensive line is very good, no doubt about it. Jonathan Taylor, very good. I even think their wide receiver group is pretty solid. I do. But I just don't see anything special about this team. So they'll be competitive, and inevitably, when Anthony Richardson gets hurt again, because that just seems like what always happens, the guy is injury prone. He has lack of experience. Even when Anthony Richardson played last year, he was up and down. But because the fantasy output was good, everybody acts like he was amazing in those games. And that's just where we are as a football cognoscenti. You know what I mean? So I have the Colts going 8-9. I think they're third in the division, and I don't really see any reason to change my mind on that. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today, folks. Tomorrow, we're going to cap off the AFC Deep Dive series, talking to Tony Wiggins, Locked On Jags. Always a fun conversation. Me and Tony have some good banter back and forth always between these teams on Twitter and all of that. I dive into my thoughts on Jacksonville, who, if I have Houston at 1, and I have the Titans at 2, and I have the Colts at 3, that tells you where I think the Jags will finish. So excited to dive into that tomorrow. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.